The interstellar ship Avalon is moving through space, heading for a colony world called Homestead 2. All the living areas are empty, and the ship is running on autopilot. The 258 crew members and 5,000 passengers are asleep in hibernation. The ship drifts into an asteroid belt that weakens its shields. Power is shifted to the main shield, but a huge asteroid is still on a collision path. The asteroid strikes the ship and triggers a chain of systems failures. The ship starts repairing itself, but one hibernation pod activates by mistake. The person who wakes up is Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. His pod opens and an automated system assists his awakening, telling him he has been asleep for 120 years and the ship is only 4 months away from Homestead 2. It explains that he can spend the remaining time enjoying the luxury parts of the ship. Jim gets instructions about his ID band, his cabin, and the activities planned for him before arrival. Excited and nervous to meet others, he gets ready, leaves his cabin, and enters an automated class built for a whole group of passengers. Jim looks uneasy while the hologram talks about Earth, calling it overpopulated, overpriced, and overrated. It tells him to save his questions for the end, but Jim keeps asking why he is alone. He realizes the hologram cannot answer and starts looking for other people. He reaches the main concourse of the ship, but no one is there and only an automated information desk offers help. Jim asks to speak with a real person, and it sends him to a steward, but that area is empty too, so he asks to see the captain. He reaches the bridge, but does not have access to go inside, and sees that none of the crew is awake either. Jim then visits the observatory, where he learns the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead 2. He understands he woke up far too soon and rushes back to the concourse to send a message to Earth asking what to do since he does not know how to return to hibernation. The communication system tells him the expensive message would take 55 years to get a reply. Jim feels crushed. He wanders until he finds the ship bar where he spots another person. As he speaks with the bartender, something feels off. When the bartender goes to pour a drink, Jim realizes he is an android named Arthur. Jim wants to learn more from Arthur, but he cannot even explain to the android how he woke up so early. The next day, Jim wakes up in his cabin and goes to the cantina, where he quickly notices that most of the menu is for gold-class passengers only. He takes his plain coffee and starts thinking about how to fix his hibernation pod. After gathering all the tools, he gets it running and lies down inside, but nothing happens. Then he tries using the tools to open the crew hibernation pods, but that fails too. Small glitches keep happening around the ship. Jim keeps going back to the bar to drink, but mostly to talk with Arthur. The android gives him advice that pushes him to break into one of the gold class rooms and try to enjoy the ship. He tests the restaurants, the games, and the entertainment system. But as time passes, he feels even more miserable, being alone. One day, he gets drunk and walks among the hibernation pods when he finds an airlock with spacesuits for spacewalks. Jim puts on a suit, enters the airlock, pulls a lever, and presses the button to open the door. Once outside the ship, he is amazed by the sight. He is the only awake human living that moment. Jim releases the magnets on his boots and floats in space, feeling broken. He returns inside, removes the suit, but then goes back to the airlock without it. He pulls the lever, ready to end everything, but stops at the last second, runs back inside, and slips on a bottle. Jim stands up and instantly notices a woman inside one of the pods named Aurora. He searches her file in the directory, listens to her passenger interview, and becomes captivated by her. Later, he is seen sitting next to her pod, still listening to her interviews. Back at the bar, he reads some of her work and talks with Arthur about her writing. He grows obsessed with the irony of his situation, traveling to another world for a better life, waking up too early, missing the planet, and finding the perfect woman only to have her out of reach. He keeps thinking about her and starts to consider waking her up. He talks it over with the android, but Arthur does not grasp the dilemma. If Jim wakes her for his own need, he will trap her on the ship to die with him. At first, Jim refuses to do it, but as time passes, he cannot let go of the thought. One day, he changes his mind. He goes to her pod and manages to activate it. As she wakes
wakes up and goes through the same process, he hides and returns to his room. A little later, Jim goes to the main concourse hoping to see Aurora. He finds her there just as lost as he was a year earlier. Jim tells her they are the only ones awake and takes her to the observatory. He explains that he cannot reach the crew or the main controls of the ship. Aurora panics and wants to get back into her pod. At the pod, Jim tells her there is no equipment on the ship that can put them back into hibernation and that they are stranded.
They return to the concourse and he suggests she rest since she just woke up. She feels sorry for him for spending more than a year alone on the ship. Jim returns to the bar full of regret for what he has done. He asks Arthur not to tell Aurora that he was the one who woke her up. The next day, Aurora wakes up and goes back to the concourse to ask the automated info desk about the pods. Jim joins her and they go to get breakfast. In the cantina, Aurora notices Jim has eaten the same breakfast for more than a year and gets him food from the gold class menu. They talk about fixing the pods, but Aurora, unlike Jim, is not ready to give up. She searches the infirmary, then combs through research files and ends up at the crew hibernation quarters, trying to open the doors. Jim keeps seeing more problems around the ship. Sometime later, Aurora feels the weight of her life on the Avalon. She writes, runs around the ship, and swims in the pool, growing more aware of her situation. She goes to the cantina to interview Jim, thinking his story could be interesting. She asks why he left for the colony. Jim at first gives company slogans, but then admits he hoped to build a new life and become somebody on the new world. Later, they are in the observatory, and Aurora finally reveals her reason for traveling. Unlike the other passengers, she has a round-trip ticket. She planned to go to Homestead 2, live there for a year, and return to Earth to become the first journalist to do it, writing the greatest story ever. Aurora slowly starts to give up on fixing their problem, and Jim comes up with a way to lift her spirits. Jim takes Aurora dancing, then to the cinema, and then to the basketball court. Finally, he brings her to the bar to meet Arthur. She relaxes for a while until the thought of their situation comes back. Jim stays with the android, feeling guilty about what he has done. Later, he's seen building something, and Aurora finds a small model of the Chrysler building waiting for her in the observatory. Sometime after that, they go on a date at the bar. They eat dinner and share stories from their lives. Aurora tells him her father died when she was a teenager. After dinner, Jim takes her to the airlock and they put on spacesuits. They step outside for a spacewalk together. Jim finally has someone to share the view with. He turns off the magnets on their boots and they float side by side in space. They return inside and kiss, then head to his cabin and sleep together. Before long, they live as a couple. Aurora moves into his cabin and writes about her life on the ship. They run together, eat together, and sleep together. Jim explores the ship and finds the hydroponics bay, then brings Aurora flowers. One day, the ship passes near a red giant star and they watch it from the observatory. It is Aurora's birthday, so later they celebrate in a restaurant and then at the bar. Jim steps into the washroom to prepare a ring he crafted for her while she stays talking with Arthur. The android reveals that Jim woke her up on purpose, not realizing it was a secret. Jim returns and Aurora confronts him in shock. She runs off angry and terrified. When Jim gets back to his cabin, all of her belongings are gone. The next day, he sees her in the cantina, but she runs as soon as he speaks. Aurora feels hopeless. One night, she storms into his cabin, attacking him in rage. Jim tries to speak to her over the comm system since she keeps avoiding him. He apologizes and explains that he fell in love with her, but she does not care. She cannot forgive him for taking her future. One night in his cabin, Jim notices another malfunction as the ship suffers a critical error and the main command shuts down. Later, the elevator fails while he rides it. Aurora walks into the main concourse and discovers that Jim has planted a tree there. She then goes to the cantina where the food machines are breaking down. Suddenly, both of them hear the deck chief speaking over the comms, asking who planted the tree. They both run into the concourse and see Gus Mancuso standing by Jim Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and explain the situation to him. He cannot understand how 3 pods failed. Mancuso takes them to the bridge, where he finds that something is wrong with the ship, but the data must be checked by hand. As they leave the bridge, a robot nearly falls on them, and they tell Mancuso that malfunctions are happening more and more across the ship. He says that should not be possible and shows them how to collect system data. Mancuso goes to inspect the pods, and Jim joins him there, having figured out what happened with Aurora's pod. The deck chief calls Jim's act terrible. Later, he is at the bridge studying the collected data when Aurora arrives. They talk about her pod, but he tells her he cannot undo it. Jim enters carrying the 16th broken robot. Mancuso begins to show hibernation sickness, so he leaves to rest, but coughs blood as he walks out. That night, Aurora cannot sleep and goes for a swim. Suddenly, the ship loses gravity and she starts drowning as the water lifts with her. The gravity drive resets and she barely escapes. They bump into each other as they rush to find Mancuso. All 3 meet again at the bridge, slowly piecing together what has gone wrong with the ship. Mancuso deduces that an event 2 years ago damaged a major system. They must locate and fix the cause because the ship is overloading itself to compensate. If they fail, the vessel will be lost. They set out to find the problem, but Mancuso collapses, so Jim and Aurora take him to the infirmary.
He is dying and nothing can cure or slow it. Later, they gather in the observatory where Mancuso hands Jim his ID band, tells them to repair the ship, and then dies. Suddenly, the lights shift to red and the ship starts to shake. Jim tells Aurora he needs her help and they run to engineering, but the gravity drive fails again, and at the same moment, Arthur is hit by another failure. Jim powers Arthur down. They reach engineering and search for the fault. They find it in the power plant, and when they open the hatch, Aurora is pulled inside. An asteroid has torn a hole in the hull there. Jim is pulled in too, but holds on to the hatch as it closes on him. Eventually, he is dragged in, but together they manage to seal the breach. Right after fixing it, Jim sees there is another breach somewhere else. They trace the meteor's path and discover it struck the reactor control computer. Jim thinks he can locate replacement parts for it. They find the part and replace it, but venting the reactor still fails. They try it by hand, but it fails again. Jim realizes he must open the vent door from outside so the reactor can cool down. They go to the airlock, and as he suits up, he gives Aurora Mancuso's bracelet because he might not return. She helps him into the suit, and as he steps into the airlock, she begs him to come back because she cannot live on the ship without him. Aurora returns to the reactor where the heat has reached critical levels. A bolt from the reactor strikes her arm as Jim nears the vent from the outside and spots the door. The temperature rises in the reactor room while he works to override the vent door. He understands he must hold it open manually so the reactor can vent and tells Aurora. She hates the plan, but he insists and tells her to vent the reactor. She does not want him to die, and they argue, but he says they have to save everyone, and she vents the reactor. It works, but the blast of gas throws Jim off and breaks his tether. His suit starts losing pressure. He tells Aurora what happened, and she rushes to get another suit and go after him. He apologizes once more. She suits up and flies out, but her tether is too short and pulls her back. She grabs his loose tether at the last moment and drags him in. Aurora hauls Jim into the infirmary only to see that he is dead. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to override the medical protocols and start resuscitation. The pod works automatically and brings Jim back to life. Aurora forgives him. Later, she repairs Arthur and they give Mancuso a proper space burial. Jim then shows her the infirmary and explains he found a way to use the medical pod for hibernation. He tells her to get inside and finish the trip asleep. Later, it is revealed she chose to stay with him awake on the ship. Jim finally proposes to her and they spend their lives together on board. 88 years later, the Avalon reaches Homestead 2. The crew wakes and finds the ship in an unexpected state. Aurora leaves a message telling the story of the life she and Jim lived on the ship while the rest slept. Thanks for watching, and make sure you subscribe for more movie recaps.